I never really fancied myself a storyteller, and honestly, the idea of reliving this particular shift makes the hair on my neck stand straight up. But here we go. It was a gig I took up last winter, overnight desk clerk at an inn smack in the middle of nowhere. I needed the cash, and they needed someone too desperate to ask questions about why the last 5 clerks quit. Classic. The Quail Ridge Inn, a 3-story relic of peeling paint and creaky floorboards perched right by the interstate, looked more like the house from a canceled ghost hunting show. It reeked of mildew and mothballs, the kind of stench that clings to your clothes like a needy cat. First day on the job, and the manager, this wiry guy with nervous eyes named Keith, handed me a wrinkled set of keys and a list. Yes, a list, not procedures or a handbook, but a list. Rules for the night shift, it was titled. Quaint, right? Rule 1, keep the front desk lamp on, it keeps things proper. Rule 2, always answer the phone by the 3rd ring. Rule 3, never let the lobby fire go out. Rule 4, ignore the sounds from the locked maintenance room. Rule 5, if someone named Mr. Dorchester asks for a room, give him keys to room 204. Do not engage. Keith left with a simple, "You'll do fine. Just follow the rules," and a pat on the shoulder that felt more like a condolence than encouragement. The beginning of the shift was uneventful, filled with the usual checking in of weary travelers and few phone calls from people who'd lost their way on the interstate asking for directions. Around midnight, the inn settled into a deep, unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional rumble of a truck barreling down the nearby road. That's when the strange started dialing up, not all at once, but like a slow leak. I noticed the temperature first, a sudden drop that made goosebumps dance across my skin. The fire in the lobby was dwindling, the flames looked strangely starved, despite the wood being fresh. Following Keith's rule, I tossed another log onto the fire, which seemed to resist ignition. As I bent over the hearth, trying to coax life into the flames, the front desk phone rang, slicing through the silence. By the 2nd ring, I was fumbling over, almost tripping over my own feet. Rule 2, right. Quail Ridge Inn, how can I assist? I answered. Static hissed back at me, followed by a heavy breath. Silence, then more static. I hung up, unsettled, but chalked it up to a bad connection. Shrugging off the unease, I tried to focus on a crossword puzzle I'd brought to kill time. But before I could settle, the phone rang again. 3rd ring, I answered. Static breathing, then a whispered lobby. I spun around. Nobody was there, just shadows that seemed too thick, too deliberate. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs, and I was about to dismiss it as my imagination when the fire sputtered out without reason. The room plunged into a chill that made my teeth ache. I scrambled to relight the fire, my hands shaking. It was then I heard the sound, scratching, subtle and persistent. It was coming from the maintenance room, the locked one. I stood still, almost holding my breath, trying to convince myself it was just some trapped raccoon or something mundane. But Keith's rule echoed in my head, ignore the sounds from the locked maintenance room. I managed to get the fire roaring again, attempting to dispel the shadows and the biting cold. Just as I turned to retreat back to the safety of the desk, a knock rattled the front door. Through the frosted glass, I saw a figure, broad-shouldered and tall. "Can I help you?" I asked, voice slightly quivering as I cracked open the door. A gruff voice responded, "Room for the night. Name's Dorchester." "Mr. Dorchester. Room 204. Sure, the normalcy of checking in a guest should have been comforting, except for one small problem. I had just given out the last room key to a couple not 15 minutes before. And room 204. It had been unrentable for months, indefinitely closed for maintenance. Yet there I was, handing Mr. Dorchester the keys like Keith's rules weren't just peculiar, but necessary. As he ascended the staircase, his footfalls heavy, a sudden dread settled in my gut, the kind that feels too instinctual to ignore. I stared at the dimming staircase where he disappeared, the scratching noise from the maintenance room growing louder in the background, more demanding. My fingers tightened around the railing, the old wood creaky and cool under my touch. With each scratch from the maintenance room, my heart matched its frantic pace, something within urging me toward the sound, while every sensible part of me screamed to run. But he had gone downstairs, and some part of me, maybe the part that couldn't let go of things being unresolved, sensed that the answers lay where the noise grew louder. Swallowing hard, I took the first step down. The stairs protested underfoot, a symphony of groans rippling through silence that devoured the space. The air grew colder, the light dimmer, as if the very atmosphere was warning me not to proceed. But the scratching, it twisted and turned into something like a voice, a whisper made of nails against coarse wood. Halfway down, I paused. A shiver cascaded down my spine as I noticed a small, childlike handprint on the wall, faint but undeniably red. My stomach churned. Was it blood? Paint? Neither option soothed my spiraling thoughts. I pressed my fingers against the mark, half expecting it to be wet, but it was dry, embedded into the texture of the wallpaper as if it had been there for ages. I hadn't seen this before. No, had I just not paid attention. The possibility of blindness to such a detail made me shiver with both cold and fear. Yet, moving my hand away felt wrong, a betrayal to whoever left the mark, as if acknowledging it meant I was keeping them safe somehow. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, the door to the maintenance room was ajar, spilling a sliver of flickering light onto the grim hallway. The scratching had now evolved into a steady pounding, as though something or someone was trying to get out, or get in. The thought had bile rising in my throat. With tentative steps, I edged closer, each footfall silent on the damp carpet. My hand reached out, pushing the door open with what I hoped was enough force to seem decisive, but careful enough to allow me retreat. The light inside was dim, sourced from a single bulb that swung gently from a frayed wire above. The shadows seemed to elongate with each swing, creating loping shapes that danced along the walls. It was when the light swung toward a far corner that I saw him. Not the man who had gone down before. No, this was someone or something else. It was a figure hunched over, its back turned to me, shrouded in what appeared to be dirty, frayed robes. It was feasting, no, clawing at something on the ground, pieces of what I could only pray was not flesh, scattered around it. The sound was no longer scratching, but wet, sloshy, like soggy bread being torn apart. Every instinct told me to leave, to run as far and as fast as my legs could carry me. But there, amidst the carnage, was something distinctly familiar, a watch. One very much like the one I had gifted him last Christmas, now smeared with something dark and glistening under the erratic light. Hey, my voice was a choked gasp, more involuntary than intentional. The figure stopped, its movements halting as eerily as a puppet disconnected from its strings. Slowly it turned, and though its face was obscured, two luminescent, unnaturally large eyes fixed on me, paralyzing me not just with fear, but with a grotesque sort of curiosity. Just then the bulb above flickered vehemently, as if caught in a storm, casting us both into darkness punctuated only by brief moments of light. Each flash showed it closer, until we were merely feet apart, the stench of decay overwhelming. An old memory flickered through my mind, him, laughing, saying, "Always check under the bed. That's where the monsters hide." My breath hitched. How terrifying and simple childhood fears seemed now compared to this unnameable dread that faced me. The lights died completely then, cloak of darkness enveloping the room, but I knew it was there, could feel its gaze, its breath. Silence reigned, oppressive, tangible, as if waiting for me to break it. Then, a whisper, stretched and distorted, floated towards me, making the hairs on my neck stand. "Found you." The whisper was followed by a soft, unsettling noise, almost like a giggle. The giggle echoed in the darkness, a sound so misplaced and near that my skin erupted in goosebumps. I stood frozen in the dirt lane that cut through the woods behind my house, strained to see through the opaque night, which lay thick as sludge around me. My breath puffed visibly in the icy air, each exhale a small fleeting ghost vanishing into the surrounding void. I told myself it was probably just a late-night hiker, but who hiked at this hour? And why the eerie, echoing laugh? Hugging myself, I took a tentative step forward, the beam of my flashlight cutting a narrow path through the black. The trees loomed over me, their gnarled branches dancing ever so slightly in the cold wind, whispering secrets in a language too ancient for my ears. My house should only be a short walk back, yet every snap of a twig, every gust of wind seemed to tip the world further from reality. The giggle came again, louder this time, more malicious. I spun around, heart pounding so hard I feared it might burst through my ribcage. The light flickered uncertainly, throwing monstrous shadows that twisted and writhed around me. "Who's there?" my voice cracked, sounding frail and young in the suffocating darkness. Only the mocking whistle of the wind replied, carrying with it a sharp, biting cold that wormed its way through my clothes. Pushing down the rising panic, I continued to ove one shaky step after another, telling myself that I was being ridiculous, that the city noise must be playing tricks on me out here in the silent woods. But the deeper I went, the less I believed my own reassurances. Then, piercing through the night, came the sound of a child singing. It wasn't words, but rather a tune, haunting and slow. Drawn and repelled in equal measure, I followed the sound, my thoughts a jumble of conflicting impulses. This had to be a prank, some neighborhood kids thinking it funny to terrify the newcomer. Yeah, that must be it. As I moved closer, the singing morphed into humming, a melancholic melody that seemed to seep from the throats of the trees themselves. The wind died down as if to listen, the world holding its breath. And then I saw her, the source of the melody, a small figure swinging from one of the lower branches of an old willow tree, her back to me. "Hey," I called out, my voice strangled by a mix of fear and concern. My flashlight beam settled on her, the light revealing a little girl in a pale dress, her feet bare and dirt-stained. She stopped swinging, her head tilting to one side as if considering me. But she didn't turn around. "Are you lost?" My voice trembled like a leaf. The girl resumed her swinging silently, ignoring my question. Every instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong here. Children didn't play alone in the woods at night, didn't ignore grown-ups, didn't vanish. I blinked and she was gone. No sound, no movement, simply gone. The branch she had been sitting on swayed gently as if in farewell. I spun around frantically, the beam of my flashlight darting wildly through the trees, seeking something, anything. There was a shuffle behind me, a soft scurry of feet on dead leaves. I turned, half expecting to see the girl, but instead, my light fell upon an old porcelain doll, lying face up among the roots of a tree. Its glassy eyes stared vacantly up at me, and its mouth was open in a silent scream. The fabric of its gown fluttered slightly in a breeze I could not feel. Gulping down the ice forming in my throat, I backed away, the decayed face of the doll seared into my mind. Every step was a torture, the forest seemingly denser, the night darker, the silence a weight upon my chest. Then suddenly, stark and invasive, my phone rang, slicing through the tension. I yelped, fumbled it out of my pocket with numb fingers. The screen lit up, caller ID flashing. Mom. Before I could answer, another giggle, this one right in my ear, a sweet, syrupy sound that had no right to be so terrifying. I dropped the phone, turned, but there was nothing, just the dark, just the cold, just me. I was alone, but never had I felt such an overwhelming presence around me. Breathing hard, I snatched up my phone and ran, knowing without looking that the house was still too far, the night too deep. Wherever safety lay, it was beyond my reach, hidden in shadows that whispered and laughed at my fear. The ragged sound of my breathing distorted the night's eerie silence as if it amplified its mockery. With each step, the darkness eagerly swallowed the weak glow of my phone's flashlight. The trees, standing like sentinels, allowed no comfort, their branches grasping, scratching the sky and sometimes the back of my neck. At least, that's how it felt. An icy prickle ran down my spine, urging my legs to move faster, stumble harder. I should have reached the edge of the forest by now. Logic, however, seemed to have deserted the woods together with daylight. The path familiar in every other noontime escapade now twisted and turned in a maddened dance I couldn't follow. My lungs screamed for respite as the whispering shadows grew denser, their laughter now a cacophonous symphony that crescendoed with my mounting despair. A root unseen in the inadequate light claimed my foot and sent me sprawling to the ground. The phone clattered out of my grip, its light careening wildly before settling. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs, not just from the fall, but from the terror that this sudden vulnerability invited. On hands and knees, I scrambled towards my phone, the dirt cold and moist under my palms. As I grabbed it, the light flickered, stuttered, then steadied. I dared to glance back the way I came. Nothing but the narrowing path and the dense, pressing dark. I turned the phone's light ahead and froze. There, standing with improbable stillness, was a figure, a silhouette so deeply black it seemed to consume the meager light rather than reflect it. Swallowing a scream, I slowly rose to my feet. My mind yelled run, but my body betrayed me, frozen to the spot. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. But its presence, a void against the night, spoke volumes of unnatural menace. With every ounce of self-preservation I possessed, I shifted my gaze away from the figure, turning the flashlight's beam off. Darkness enveloped me, but perhaps, I thought, the darkness was a fur if it kept me hidden. Sweat mingled with the cold air, forming an unpleasant layer on my skin as I calculated my next move. Could I backtrack without making a sound? The idea was ludicrous, yet wholly necessary. Quiet as I could, I began to retreat, step by painstaking step. The squelch of wet leaves underfoot sounded like gunshots in the oppressive silence. A low, resonant hum began to fill the air, an unnatural sound that seemed both distant and terribly close. I stifled a gasp as I felt something cold and slight as a feather drift across my cheek. Thinking it might be the faint brush of a leaf, I raked a hand across my face but felt nothing. The temperature dropped sharply, my breath becoming visible in little puffs against the night. It should not be this cold, not this time of year. As the hum grew louder, clearer, it took on the quality of a lullaby, distorted and dragging. Saplings on either side of the path began to sway with no wind to guide them, the movement syncopated unnaturally with the haunting melody. Tempted by folly, my fingers twitched towards the flashlight's power button, desperate for even the smallest comfort of light. But I remembered the black-suited figure and refrained, moving blind and hoping my memory of the woods would serve me better than my sight. Every step promised safety, but delivered none. The laughing shadows, the chilling lullaby, it was a symphony orchestrated to herald something far more sinister, and I was the solitary audience, compelled to endure its premiere. Finally, in a moment of dread-pierced clarity, I understood. The forest didn't want me to leave. It was no longer a mere stretch of woods by my home, but a sentient, breathing entity focused solely on my retention. The realization didn't slow my retreat. If anything, It hastened my resolve to escape the oppressive clutch of those whispering trees. Yet even as I recognized the woods' malevolent intent, I stumbled forward with dwindling hope, the sounds of the night crescendoing around me. A haunting reminder that the forest had not done with me yet, not until it sang its malevolent lullaby through to the very last bitter note.